jolly good. Hello, boys and girls. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Clayton Zoka. Welcome to another of my thoughts on. Today, I'll be talking about 28 Weeks Later. 28 Weeks Later. Which is the sequel, I guess, spin-off thingy to 28 Days Later, which I loved. Love that movie. It's up there with Shaun of the Dead as being one of the best infected movies, because you don't want to use the C word, because that's ridiculous. So we have this sequel, or this follow-up, or I don't know, but it is in the same universe as 28 Days Later, and I've never watched it. I've never ever seen I've never seen the sequel before, and apparently, interestingly, this sequel Metacritic score is 78, and the Metacritic score for the first one was 73. But the rating on IMDb is higher with the first film than this one. So from what I can tell, this seems very split upon people. People either really like it or don't, and the first 28 Days Later is considered a cult classic in a way. So, what do I think of 28 Days Later? 28 Weeks Later? Fucking hell, what's next? 28 years later? 28 months later? Wait a minute. Okay. So the movie is pretty much like... story-wise, it's just like the first film, only with different people. Not even... The characters from the first film don't even return, and there's like no mention of them at all. Anyway, so the military come in. The American ones. They come in and they take control of the area, and they make sure everyone is in the zone. A nurse, played by Rose Byrne, has to take these two children somewhere. I don't know where, but there you go. There you go. And they are also protected by Doyle, played by Jeremy Renner, before Hawkeye. Speaking of which, I am currently... as I'm recording this is recorded on the same day as the Hawkeye teaser. How convenient. So what they have to do is, just try and get into a safe area, I suppose, and get away from all the infected. Especially from their dad, played by Robert Carlisle. Carlisle? I don't know how you pronounce it, but he turns into one of them, of course, and yeah. And where do I begin? First off, this film is an hour and 40 minutes, and the first film was longer. The first film, in terms of story, felt a lot more satisfying in terms of how it ended. It ended on something that's not only kind of meaningful, but also something that could be considered good and, thought-provoking, and could leave you with questions and all that. And the story is so interesting and so well told, and it has a sense of dread and like small atmosphere. It works as a story in terms of what else you can do when the infected arrive in London, and when it spreads, and what you can do, and what the story turns into. It's interesting and incredible, well written, different and unique. This film has none of that whatsoever. Okay, maybe a little, but not a lot. This is the most standard infected movie ever. Or one of, because I've never seen a bad horror film, maybe. I'm trying to think of a bad horror film that I've watched. Oh, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. That wasn't very good, but yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know. I don't know how to. I don't know how to put it into words. I can't. Okay, Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, is a bad horror film. The Mummy, technically, the Tom Cruise one, technically isn't, but it is still bad. But this is probably the closest to being kind of mediocre in a way. But there are a few things I do kind of like about the story. First off, the scares are actually quite effective here. Not quite as legit, chillingly terrifying as the first film, but there was one occasion where it made me jump, and to a point where it made my skin crawl. And oh yeah, I hate it when films do that, but it did work for a good reason. The story's not as good as the first, as I mentioned. I think the first is more interesting, more unique. This one's pretty basically standard, and it's, I don't know, it is what it is. It's not too complicated, I guess. And a couple of interesting scenes of shooting the infected, with Jeremy Renner. Good chases, good runaways. It's not awful. However, it's just the story and everything else around it that bothers me. First off, the military. Okay, I might have to give out a little bit of spoilers here, but honestly, this is kind of to be expected. Okay, spoiler alert for 28 weeks later. This may not be a spoiler. A spoiler, really, but the military are stupid. They just kill whoever comes out of the quarantine zone. I get it. I mean, I do understand in terms of, because, they don't know who's infected, so they have to shoot everyone to be safe. But you don't fucking know that. They're safe. They're not. They could be bitten, but you don't know if they're going to turn or not. And the General Stone, who's played by Idris Elba, who's not British in his natural accent, which is weird. He's basically just telling them to shoot civilians just to be safe, Yeah, that's it. It's fucking weird. It is so strange. So stupid too, and the film goes by so. I'll give it this though: it does go by quite quickly, and it does feel short. But the problem is that it feels short, that it doesn't feel accomplished. It doesn't feel like anything's changed, or the ending feels satisfying in a way. But yeah, it. When it ended, I thought I didn't quite know how to think of it. What you know will happen is going to happen. It leaves on a cliffhanger, which makes me wonder what the third film would be. And I'm hoping the third film will bring back the original cast and the original characters. Fuck. Okay, I'll give the film this. The opening is pretty good. It starts off the tone well. The scares are actually pretty effective, and it's heart pounding. There's even one really good scene where someone has to explain what happened to another loved one, and it's acted well and it's explained well. That's great, but then it lost me halfway through to the point that I couldn't really give that much of a shit about. Like, you know what's going to happen, even if everything about it is done well. It just doesn't feel special or new in... I don't know. In that way. The first film felt a lot more urgent and it felt a lot more impactful. But this one, I don't know, this just feels like the quality of the story feels like something you'd watch on bloody... You know, I don't know if this applies to all countries, but... You know, in Tesco's or in like all these supermarkets, I don't know if HMV or FOP does that, but you know when you go into the DVD aisle, they have these like DVDs, and I'll get onto that in a minute, but hear me out. They have these stories on the back of the DVD that sound very basic, generic, and familiar too. But yeah, you look on the back and you look at the cover, it's like, this film feels like a cheap Tesco's DVD movie or something with famous actors. I don't know. This isn't directed by Danny Boyle, I forgot to mention. So he produced it and Alex Garland did, and you can clearly tell that this isn't their project. I was kind of disappointed, really. The story is not good. It could be worse, but everything else... I mean, the opening to the film is pretty good. And there were a couple of scenes I did quite admire, and a few scares that genuinely terrified me. Not as much as the first, not as like heart-poundingly scary as shit first movie, but you know, they worked. But the story and the execution and the running time, it feels fast, unfocused, kinda not interesting, generic, simple. I mean, the first film was simple, but it was simple in a great way. This one, not really. I'll give them credit that they did try, but not as hard as the first film, unfortunately. Visuals. The film's visuals are something that I am kind of mixed on. Like, how do I put this? On one hand, it looks impressive. It looks better in some cases than the first. Oh, excuse me. In some cases, it looks better than the first film. Like obviously the technology, the camera, the visual effects, and the lighting. It looks better in that way, but the first film achieved what it could in a technical way. Sure, it looked very cheap for its camera quality and effects and everything else, but it did create this atmospherically, depressing but also really haunting look, scary also, that worked in that really early cheap 2000s look. This comes back to my point that it looks like a cheap DVD movie that you find in like Tesco's or bloody Morrison's. It looks very average, run-of-the-mill, military-infected action movie kind of a thing. There's also shaky cams and scenes where it's all shot in the dark and you can't see what's happening. It's one of those movies. To give credit where credit's due, visually it looks prettier and brighter and well shot. Better than the first film, but like I said, the first film did it in its own way better in terms of atmosphere and creepy factor, but this one looks nice. And some of the effects are still as strong as the first film. The blood is a little bit off. It looks like brown sauce. But yeah. Despite how cheap it looks and how the effects sometimes don't hold up as well as the first, because the first mostly kept them looking as real and as believable as possible, the infected, but these ones look ridiculous, but not in a fun way. And I know this film does get a bit silly, but the first film was never like that. It was a little bit silly, but not overly silly, but it worked in a different, unique, and believable way. Oh, excuse me. But this one, not really. Again, they tried and it did succeed, kind of, but it didn't quite reach the credibility that the first film did, and this one just looks too familiar for me to properly praise it, I suppose. The characters and acting, I gave no solitary shit about these characters. None of them interested me. They're all exactly who you think they are, but not interesting enough. That's all I've got to say, really. I would say who they're supposed to be, but I think you kind of get the idea. Even Doyle, played by Jeremy Renner, is not interesting. He does have a couple of good lines and can be helpful, but that's about it. And Scarlett's there to help the kids, and Don's the father that gets infected first, and that's not a spoiler. I assume people know that already. Again, this is spoilers. Stone is the generic general villain, and also we don't find out what happens to him also. Imogen Poots is in this, and she was in She was in The Father, and she was also in Green Room. Both films that I've actually talked about this year, funnily enough. So, whoops, I dropped my phone. So that's cool, I guess. She plays Tammy. Yeah, that's all I've got to say, really. Even if the characters are not interesting and are very unmemorable, the acting is really fucking good. Right, let's start off with Don, played by Robert Carlisle. He is incredible in this movie, and granted, his acting is not a lot, and I wish he was in the film longer. He was in There's Only One Jimmy Savile, wasn't there? Jimmy Grimmel. And he was really fucking strong in that, and he was solid. He seemed like a very down-to-earth and incredible actor. I don't think I've seen him in anything else besides these two movies. But he is really solid in both films. In here, when he explains what happened to the kid's mother, he really fucking played that scene well. He got emotional. He played the part so well, and he played that scene incredibly. He is probably my favourite part of the movie. Jeremy Renner's pretty good, and Rose Byrne's just fine, but it's just Robert. He really delivers the emotion and the heart and the down-to-earth feel. It works. Idris Elba, correct me if I'm wrong, in one of his earlier... I think this was way before he became quite popular, I think. Imogen Poots is fine. Macintosh Moggleton, what a name, he plays Andy, and he's alright from his age. I can't remember who else is in the movie that's worth mentioning, I suppose. But yeah, I think the acting does its job justice. I think it does the film justice, I should probably say. Yeah. Characters are all not memorable, very forgettable, but at least, and I do mean this, at least the acting kind of made up for it. Especially Robert, who is the best part of the whole movie. But that's not enough to say the characters are amazing. They're not. It's just the actors are putting amazing effort into this. Okay, so the music in the movie is composed by John Murphy, again like the first film, coming down to the point that he uses the same theme from the first film, which is a bit bothersome, trying to remind us, hey, you like the first film, do you want the theme back? It will feel the same, and it doesn't. The music is pretty good as the first film, but the atmosphere and setting doesn't feel the same, but still a good score either way. I went into this movie with an open mind. I was hoping for something really exciting, really new, and really familiar, but in a good way compared to the first film. I didn't quite get that, but I think this could have been a lot worse. 28 weeks later, it's a very shortly disappointing and kind of standard sequel to a fucking phenomenal horror cult classic. It's got really solid, powerful acting. The effects and the camera works better. It's interesting in terms of the scares and the jump scares and the affected. Really solid opening. The opening was really fucking good, and there was one really good scene in the movie that genuinely felt emotional, and the scares actually made my skin crawl. And the score's pretty good, but the story, the characters, the cheap looking action effects, and the very lame, pantsy military. It's supposed to be like a half serious, half silly movie, but it felt mostly cheaply silly and not interesting, and you'll probably get bored and feel like you just want to watch the first film. Yeah, this is not a good sequel. Yeah, no. Just, if you love the first film, give this one a watch, but it will never beat the first film, guaranteed. So yeah, I don't recommend it. It's not very good, but if you liked the first film, who knows, you might like this one. Ratings I'm actually a little stuck on, because it's not good. It's not bad. It's just too mediocre, too average. Oh, I don't know what rating to give it. Probably like a 5 out of 10. Yeah, sounds about right. So there you go, 28 weeks later. It was something, and it wasn't very good. But yeah. There you go. Who knows, the third film, if it does happen, will be better. I doubt it, really, but who knows, I could be wrong. There hasn't been a 28-something later for almost like 2-ish decades. Yeah. Right, on Wednesday, I'll be talking about a film that came out last year, and this was before the pandemic happened, and it's a film that I didn't see when it came out, but I've heard of it. It's called I screwed that up. It's called The Call of the Wild. Oh yes. Oh yes. I mean, oh, okay, I guess. Yeah. That'll be out on Wednesday, so look forward to that. And wait for it, if you have seen 28 Weeks Later, what do you think about it? Is it good, bad, decent? Do you want to see it? Let me know below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. And until next time, bye for...